This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
Okay, so you're the lucky one because, full disclosure, I also bought silver, but I bought it just before the crash this year. So I bought it exactly the wrong time and I have lost money, right? So yeah, I guess it really is just, we can never predict the geopolitical events that will happen and the trends that will pop up. So I guess it is almost like a gamble in that sense, right? Or the fact that with every investment there does come some risk that you are unable to hedge entirely or to predict.
I guess it depends on your time frame as well, right? If you look at silver prices in the early 2000s, that was 8 Singapore dollars per ounce, but now, this morning is trading at 94 Singapore dollars per ounce. So, if you look at it, a more than 20-year time frame, then yeah, I guess it's still a good long-term investment.
Markets have been abuzz about the shine of gold in 2025. But how about silver? Is it also a good investment? Silver prices have been very volatile, especially in 2026, with a strong rally last year but a crash earlier this year. So should you still buy silver? What are its long-term prospects? Hi, I'm Suen Tan, and you're listening to Headstart on Record, the show that gives you a head start in your personal finance, career, and life. In the studio with me is CMC Markets expert Daphne Tan and our ST commodities journalist Timothy Goh. So Daphne, can you first explain, how does silver compare to gold as an investment? Is it also the safe haven that gold is?
Sure. So in comparison, we can think of gold is traditionally treated as a pure safe haven because it's an intrinsic store of value. So that's what people turn to. On the other hand, silver tends to be more of a hybrid. So while gold is mostly held for protection against inflation, currency risk, and also global uncertainty, silver as well, but its demand also tends to be more industrial. So it can be used in things like EV, solar, electronics, in which case silver tends to be more volatile because it reacts not only to risk, but also to growth. So what we can think of it as in protection, if a situation requires protection, we can look at gold. And in terms of silver, it tends to be more trend-based and reactive.
Okay. And we know that silver prices have moved a lot, right, in the last few months. So maybe you can give us an idea of how they have moved so far.
Sure. So as we were at the end of 2025, it's been a volatile few months because it started really strong. And then when we started going into 2026, at the end of January, we saw quite a sharp drop. That drop was almost 40%, and that could be due to a couple of things, but I would say the main driver is a shift in rate expectations. So there was a pullback in expecting the rates to be cut, in which case the US dollar strengthened, and I think that contributed to the drop. While we did also see things like geopolitics and all, I feel like that was more of a short-term noise, could have contributed a little bit, but in general, I think quite classic move for silver because it tends to move up very quickly and also down very quickly in that sense.
Okay, I see. So it shows greater price swings compared to gold, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess, now we're in a time of geopolitical turmoil, and we often say that is the time that gold prices increase. So in terms of silver, I think you have spoken a bit about the things that cause it to swing, but, will war cause silver prices to increase as well?
That's possible because war is associated with risk. So, of course, it does depend on the type of geopolitical tension and what else it affects. But usually when there is risk involved, people tend to go towards precious metals. So gold is usually the front runner. And then we have silver that can benefit from that as well.
Okay. So that's very helpful. Tim, you have been a strong proponent for buying silver last year. So where do you stand now?
I think as you guys discussed, prices have been very volatile. There are a couple of things going on right now, right? So the war in the Middle East is causing a surge in oil prices, and that means that, you're undoubtedly going to have price fluctuations in the precious metals market because higher energy costs could fuel inflation, keep interest rates higher for longer, and that isn't very good news for non-yielding precious metals like silver and gold. So I think in the long term, if you look at the geopolitical situation, as Daphne said, there is risk and there could be an upside, but in the short term, there could be some more price volatility.
Okay. And I think Daphne, you also mentioned things like EVs, right? And trends that can drive the price of silver. So how is the price of silver then connected to these trends? For example, if we think that there are going to be more EVs in the future, or let's say technology, do we need silver for all those different parts, right? Does it drive up long-term demand?
So it can. That is overall dependent on economic growth. I think when you do have an outlook that economic growth is strong in the future, then that generally drives up silver as well. In which case, if let's say economic growth is not as great as we are now or have been, then that would dampen the demand for silver.
Okay. So in that case, I guess there's no like surefire way of saying, right, where silver is going to go. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly, because silver tends to be a bit more of taking a tactical position based on a macro trend. So it's as and when you spot the trend and then you get into that.
In that case then, because when it comes to gold, people say, oh, you should hold it for the long term, right? I think in our previous episode, some of the experts even said they hold it for the next generation. So it's not even something he's going to sell in his lifetime, but he's just going to pass it on to his children because he thinks that in the long term, that's maybe even 30 to 50 years, that it will increase in price quite substantially. For silver, is that the same kind of thing?
It wouldn't be quite the same because gold is generally a longer term store of value. So people tend to flood into that for a lot of reasons, right? If there is uncertainty or they want to hedge against currency risk, they start flooding into gold. And it is something that you can hold for a long time. Whereas silver tends to be very macro based. You don't really know because it's a hybrid. So it's not just a store of value. It is, but there is also other factors involved, in which case silver is very cycle based. So it depends on what you're spotting in the market at the moment. And then generally investors would probably hold it for a medium-term time frame and not for a very long, like 20 to 30 years, as you have mentioned.
And I think central banks, they do not count silver as a strategic reserve asset.
That's
so
correct.
that contributes to the volatility in silver prices as well.
Exactly.
Okay, so for example, I mean, if I'm a silver investor, what are the sort of things that I should look out for then? Because it means that I have to actually watch the market, right? Do some research, do some homework rather than just letting things take their course and expecting that the price will increase.
That's correct. So it depends on also what you're looking for. So people don't generally look at silver unless gold is doing very well. Because silver
Right.
tends to benefit from that. And sometimes people think that, gold looks so overbought, it's so expensive. Maybe we'll look at down the chain to silver. And amongst precious metals, gold and silver tend to be the most commonly known, in which case silver tends to get attention because gold is doing well. Not always the case. I do think more focused investors do start to research into silver and other metals as well. But it really depends on when it comes into the spotlight and then for what reason. And the investor, if they're interested, can then look into that.
Okay. So Tim, I mean, you hold silver, right? So when do you first buy it and why do you decide to buy it then?
So it's a bit of a funny story. I was running out of ideas for one of our columns, Young and Savvy. So I decided, why not write about, because I've been talking about gold for the past year or so. So I decided to write about silver. And I thought, why not actually go down to a shop and buy silver? So I went on to a dealer. I bought about a couple ounces of silver coins. So I think I've sort of doubled my capital so far.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty good.
Wait. So when was it that you first bought it?
In October in 2025.
Oh, so it's just last
Yeah.
year and you have doubled it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny story because the dealer told me then that silver hasn't really taken off yet in terms of price. And I think right after that, it really skyrocketed before it crashed on in January, but I'm still up. So
It sounds like you got in at the right time because it was
Yeah.
before all the interest and cash started flowing into silver.
yeah. So I thought he was just trying to sell me a product, but in the end, he was right. Yeah.
Okay, so you're the lucky one because full disclosure, I also bought silver, but I bought it just before the crash this year. So I bought it exactly the wrong time and I have lost money, right? So yeah, I guess it really is just, I mean, we can never predict the geopolitical events that will happen and the trends that will pop up. So I guess it is almost like a gamble in that sense, right? Or the fact that with every investment there does like come some risk that you are unable to hedge entirely or to predict.
I guess it depends on your time frame as well, right? I mean, if you look at silver prices in the early 2000s, that was about 8 Singapore dollars per ounce. But now, I mean, this morning it's trading at 94 Singapore dollars per ounce. So, I mean, if you look at it, a more than 20-year time frame, then yeah, I guess it's still a good long-term investment.
So Tim, do you then consider silver a long-term investment for yourself? Like, are you intending to hold it for the long term or are you going to watch the market and find a good place to sell it?
I mean, I don't hold that much silver, so even if I sell it now, it's just the profit is negligible, I guess. Yeah. So, I mean, if prices do go up, then I might sell some pieces. Yeah.
Okay. And Daphne, do you then hold gold and silver yourself?
I don't hold silver, but maybe this podcast got me slightly interested in it.
Okay.
But usually I prefer gold, a bit more traditional in that sense. I like gold as jewelry. I also like them as an investment because as we did see earlier on in the last couple of months, gold tends to do well, especially in the current world situation that we are in now. If things are unpredictable and there tends to be a lot of things that we cannot predict, then gold tends to profit from that, right? So I am a very big fan of gold.
So, I mean, when we talk about trends like EVs and, tech, do you think that will prompt more people to buy silver in the future?
It could be. It depends on what developments there are in tech and whether that silver is specifically required for that. Because as you can see, when we did start with the semiconductors and the microchips, there was a very specific sector that had the potential for growth, in which case, unless silver is required for something that is put on the map in a very large manner, in which case we might see the demand for that. Otherwise, we'll spot when the next trend comes out.
Okay. And I guess with gold, people say that the value will always increase because of the limited supply, right? Is that also the same case for silver?
Oh, that one, I think it would depend. I think gold, because it is the traditional store, so that would be applicable to gold. In silver, in which case, I'm not too sure about that one. What do you think, Timothy?
Not sure as well.
I guess it's just that the fundamentals of both are different, right?
Yeah,
even though they're both precious metals, but
I think silver has been in a supply deficit at about 17% on average for the past couple of years. So that could be one price driver.
Right.
It's also a much better conductor of electricity than gold or copper. So with the rise of EVs, with the rise of technology, that could be one of the main drivers.
Okay, yeah, that's quite interesting as well, right? And I think just now you did mention that the price of silver has actually increased so much, like over the last, decade or so.
More than 2 decades, yeah.
Yeah, so that would definitely be, I guess, silver showing some promise, right, in the long term. And so for Tim, how do you buy your silver? I think you mentioned going down to a store. So am I right in saying that you store your own physical silver then?
That's right. I hold on to it physically.
In your house?
I can't say.
Okay, but why do you decide to buy silver physically instead of digital or paper?
I guess it's the same case as gold, right? I like to feel and touch and, my precious metals rather than seeing it as numbers on the app.
Do you think it makes it harder to sell though?
I don't. I mean, it's just a matter of going down to a dealer and selling it at a reasonable premium. It's the same case for gold as well, but for some people, paper gold or paper silver might be better because essentially it's just pressing a button and your assets get sold. So yeah,
right. So it's like a matter of convenience.
So
versus,
in one scenario you get to see it, you get to feel it, you get to touch it. The other one you make money faster, I guess.
Right, that's true. And I think last year you mentioned that when it came to gold, there were actually people queuing up outside the shops, right? Because it was becoming so popular. For silver, do we also see this trend? Do you see more interest in it, or is it still about the same?
I do think silver is a good way for younger investors to get into precious metals because it's cheaper than gold. From what I've seen at dealerships so far, I think when I first started buying gold, I also saw people buying large amounts of silver. So that was actually back in 2022. So to answer your question, I do think people are still trying to buy both metals. At physical metals from dealerships, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's quite interesting as well, right? To think that people who get into gold will then jump on the train to silver, although maybe sometimes they're not aware that the fundamentals are not entirely the same, right? I think even when I got into silver, my mindset was a bit like, it is like gold, it's a precious metal, so it's just going to appreciate over time, so I can just hold it for a long term. And in a time of war, I think that it will be increasing, for example. And that is not really the case, right, as we saw earlier this year.
I think this time is a bit different because of the war impacting energy prices.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So there is geopolitical certainty, which bodes well for precious metals, but there's also a rise in energy prices, and that causes inflation, which, as I said earlier, is not good news for non-yielding assets like gold and silver.
Yeah, I agree with it. This is a situation that's a little bit different because when gold and silver prices started to dip, I had people around me asking me, but I thought, gold would tend to do well in geopolitical tension. And that's exactly the explanation that I gave, similar to Timothy, because this is a little bit of a different circumstance. You have other factors to consider.
Okay. So say that I'm like a 25-year-old, I don't have that much money to spend, but I do want to have some precious metal holdings and I'm looking at silver. Like what are the maybe top things that I should know before I get into it?
I think for silver especially, because the prices are much lower than gold, you do have to look out for premiums. So that's the amount of money that the dealer charges on top so that they can make money as well. So I think the heavier that you buy, the less premium that you pay.
Right.
But it's also a little bit less liquid, because imagine selling 1 ounce coins versus selling 1 kg, a whole block of silver. So I guess that's what younger investors need to take into consideration.
Alternatively, they can also consider going into paper silver. So in that sense, they can access it via a brokerage house, because what tends to happen is they can buy it through an ETF, lower transaction fees, they don't need to worry about storage, and they can get in, they don't have to buy as much. So that's one way as well.
Maybe we can explain how a silver ETF is different from buying paper silver, in the sense that you're buying a bit of it, but you just get a paper cert, right? And versus the actual physical silver that you keep in your house.
Yeah, sure. So it depends on what they want, right? Do they want to own it, or do they want easy access? So easy access can mean a couple of things. So for example, for myself, I'm a very convenience person. I get that it's nice to look at the shiny metal, but then I just prefer to do things at a click of a button, buy and sell when I want. I don't have to physically go. So that's access. But access can also mean that if somebody has just started out, they have a lower amount of capital, but they really want to enter the market to have that exposure, in which case they can use a brokerage house, a platform to easily execute that. Owning silver, as what Tim mentioned, I do think that if they buy more, which would cost more money, it would be more beneficial to them in terms of costs that the dealer charges. So, and they would have to think about storage as well. But if somebody's mentality was to hold it long term, in which case I think physical silver is also a good option.
Right. Yeah. And we also discussed the trends just now, right, that can drive the prices of silver. So if I'm a young investor, like what are the things specifically that I should look out for in the news, for example, that, I should keep an eye on because I own silver?
Interest rates hike.
Yeah, I was just exactly that. Interest rates and what
That's
the US dollar.
Yeah, the main price driver going forward would be interest rate hikes.
Do you think you can explain that further? Like what exactly would the interest rate hike do to silver?
The recent Fed meeting, we saw interest rates being kept at the current levels. So if it gets hiked, then as I said, it's, people would rather invest in things that yield them interest. And this is not the case for gold or silver. I mean, if I was a young investor reading the news, that would be something to look out for.
Yeah, so along the same tangent, either interest rates hikes or cuts, that tends to be a driver for silver. But it depends in the current situation where we're in. It seems that there are not going to be any cuts at the moment. They're rather looking at hikes, in which case
maintaining it at the current level as well.
Yeah, so that's what young investors should look out for.
I think, Tim, you also did mention that silver is substantially cheaper for a young investor than gold is, right? So do you think it makes it more accessible for them? Or do you think that if they want to go to precious metals, their first investment in that should still be gold?
Well, you're putting me on the spot. I think ultimately they're two very different assets, right? One is more for industrial use cases. The other one is a central bank reserve asset. And that drastically reduces the volatility. So I think we saw in the January crash, gold corrected about 16 or 17%, I think. And then silver corrected more than 35%. So I guess it really depends on your risk appetite. If you want something cheaper, but more volatile, then probably go for silver. But if you want something more stable and for the long term, but it's more expensive, then probably go for gold.
Right, that's a really good point actually about knowing your risk appetite first, right, before you go into it. Not just saying, I want to buy a precious metal, I want to hold on to something like that, but it's that, where am I in my risk appetite, what am I comfortable with, right?
That's right.
Yeah, because I think the volatility for silver, as we have seen recently, is something that can be quite alarming, or it can cause an investor to panic, especially if they are holding on to like quite large quantities of it.
Yeah.
And it's also for young investors who are just starting out, what do I want my portfolio to look like? Because apart from risk appetite, I think that's one of the most important things. One of the pitfalls that investors for the first time when they start, they tend to buy whatever is hot at the moment.
Yes,
So right now
yeah.
it's silver, the last time it was Nvidia. But for example, as we have discussed a lot today, gold and silver have very different roles, right? So if they want something that can hold their portfolio down, it would be gold. But if they want something that gives them exposure to a short-term trend, similar to a tech stock in the sense that it has higher appreciation for a shorter period of time, then they'd be looking at silver in this case. So it's what they want to structure their portfolio like. Yeah.
Right. Actually, you saying that silver is, similar to like a tech stock in that sense. I think that gives quite an idea of the volatility of it, right?
To
and how
Nvidia.
it can move. Nvidia.
Maybe not in that magnitude, but yeah, close.
Yeah, okay. I guess another question that investors might have is then how does silver compare to owning stocks, right? Like if they are looking at diversifying their portfolio and they think, okay, what should I buy? How do you think silver fits into that portfolio compared to stocks?
I wouldn't compare silver to stocks in that sense. So diversification has a couple of different meanings. It can mean asset diversification, which is, like you mentioned, stocks versus commodities, right? But in this case, because I personally, this is my opinion, feel that silver in the recent months have performed a little bit like tech stock. So in which case, I would treat it as a growth type of opportunity and not so much as just a commodity. So if let's say my portfolio already had gold and then some, let's say blue chip stocks like local banks, and I did want something for that appreciation for a short term, in which case I could look at tech stocks or silver. That's how I would treat it.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
It's kind of like the mindset and the perspective of how you view your portfolio, right? And how
Like
you want
what's
to
the
build it.
role of that particular thing that I'm buying.
Okay. And I think it was mentioned just now as well that sometimes when people buy gold, they buy it in the form of jewelry, right? Or it's something that is wearable as well for them. For silver, do we see that as well? Or is it more like you said, just silver coins?
I'm not too sure about the silver jewelry market, but for gold jewelry market, I think it's a bit different because when you actually try to resell gold jewelry, the premium that first of all, the premium that you buy it at is quite high, and the premium that you sell it at is also quite high. So I think for gold jewelry, it's a very long investment timeline as compared to gold bullion, which is 99.99% pure. For jewelry, it's 91.6%. So I guess that really affects the price. Yeah.
I think that would be something that's interesting, right? To see if maybe one day it becomes a trend that people buy silver in the form of like something they can wear as well, in the way that they are. I mean, people now are into collectibles so
You
much.
don't really hear it, right? You don't
Yeah,
really
that's
hear
the
like
thing,
silver, people selling their silver earrings for a profit.
Yeah, right.
But you do hear from time to time people selling the gold necklaces for a profit after 10 years or
Yes,
so.
yeah.
I don't think the silver jewelry market, they state the percentages as clearly as the gold. Like when you walk into a gold shop, right, and you buy different jewelry, they'll state exactly like what's the quality or like how pure it is. Whereas in silver, there's just like, I think it's 825 and that's about it. They don't really state like how much it'll go for in a couple of years or like what's the purity of it.
Yeah, 825, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Actually, that's really interesting. And I think we did a real deep dive into like the differences between gold and silver and how it is really not the same investment for someone who wants to hold commodities or precious metals, right? That the fundamentals are so different and that they also need to look at it in very different ways and how it fits into their portfolio. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Headstart on Record. Thank you, Daphne.
Thank you, Suen, and thank you, Timothy.
Thank you, Suen.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you. I'm Suen Tan. You can email us your thoughts on this issue or suggest another question you'd like to see me tackle next time on the show. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you'd like to read my articles and the Headstart newsletter, all these links are in our podcast show notes. This podcast episode is edited by Amirul Karim. Stay tuned then. Thanks for listening.
Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or within our Straits Times app. Thanks for listening. Do note, all analyses, opinions, recommendations, and other information in this podcast are for general information purposes only and are not intended to be relied upon as financial advice. You should not rely on them in making any decision. Please consult a fully qualified financial advisor or professional expert for independent advice and verification. To the fullest extent permitted by law, SPH Media shall not be liable for any loss arising from the use of or reliance on any analyses, opinions, recommendations, and other information in this podcast. SPH Media accepts no responsibility or liability whatsoever that may result or arise from the products, services, or information of any third parties. All opinions expressed by participants in this podcast are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of SPH Media.